What ensues when a light weather report becomes one of the year's biggest television showdowns? When Donald Trump sat down for Today in what was initially intended to be a light-hearted interview about his favorite times of year and climate forecasts. No one anticipated the exchange would devolve into an angry showdown that would see the former president storm off set. The tension began slowly, nearly undetectable, but soon enough, it was apparent that something historic was happening live on morning TV. Before we get into what actually went down, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below letting me know what you think about this whole ordeal. Trust me, you're going to want to wait until the very end because what transpires in the last few minutes is downright shocking. Morning began as it usually did at Rockefeller Plaza. Al Roker, the popular weatherman who has been a fixture of morning TV for decades, was getting ready for what his producers had constructed as a light, relaxed segment. Trump had been guesting around town on several shows, and the Today crew believed they could get some of that catch Trump personality in a casual atmosphere. The idea was straightforward. Discuss the weather, perhaps elicit some comments about climate patterns, include some jokes, and finish up with some courtesy remarks. It should have worked. It should have been a duster. It became the nation's watercooler conversation instead. As Trump walked onto set that morning, he appeared to be in a positive mood. He greeted the crew with a handshake, waved to the crowd of viewers standing outside the studio windows, and engaged in some small talk with Savannah Guthrie before heading to the weather center where Roker was seated. The two men hugged each other with smiles, the kind of on-camera professionalism that has no trouble coming naturally when cameras are rolling. Roker, professional to his core, began with what looked like a softball question. So, Mr. President, I know you have pretty strong opinions about many things. What's your opinion on this unusually warm fall we're having? Trump leaned back in his chair, that same familiar, confident way taking hold. Well, Al, I'm going to tell you, the weather has been lovely. Really lovely. Folks are saying to me all the time. They say, have you noticed how lovely it's been? And I say, yes, I have because I pay attention to that sort of thing. A lot of folks don't pay attention, but I do. Roker nodded, still smiling, although for a moment a flicker of something appeared in his eyes. Perhaps he knew what was to come, or perhaps he was simply playing it safe. He followed that with another question, still maintaining a light-hearted tone. But, you see, Mr. President, many meteorologists are opining this warmth is really part of a greater trend we're experiencing with climate change. What do you think about that? The tone changed in Trump's demeanor, and he moved slightly more seriously. His smile remained, but it tightened just a fraction. Climate change, he said, drawing out the words. You know, Al, I've heard a lot about climate change. A lot. And I've talked to a lot of very smart people about it. Some of the smartest people you'll ever meet, and they tell me, they say, it's not as simple as some people want to make it seem. Roker's eyebrows raised slightly. Well, the science is pretty clear on this one. I mean, I've been doing weather for over 40 years, and I can tell you firsthand that we're seeing patterns that are unprecedented. The data backs it up. Trump's hand came up. That characteristic gesture he makes when he's about to make a point. The data. Okay. The data. But whose data are we talking about? Because I've seen data, too, Al. I've seen lots of data. And not all data says the same thing. You've got some scientists saying one thing, other scientists saying something completely different. So when you say the science is clear, I have to ask which science. The temperature in the studio seemed to rise, though not from any weather pattern. Roker maintained his composure, but his voice took on a slightly firmer edge. Well, with respect, Mr. President, 99% of climate scientists agree that human activity is contributing to global warming. That's not really a debate in the scientific community anymore. 99%, Trump repeated, a slight smile playing at his lips. You know, I hear that number thrown around a lot. 99%. It's a great number. Very impressive. But I wonder who counted who went and asked every single climate scientist in the world, because I know some climate scientists, really smart people, and they don't all agree with that. Roker shifted his weight and you could see him making a choice in real time. He could let it go, steer the conversation back to safer territory, or he could engage. Being the seasoned journalist he is, he chose to engage, but diplomatically. I think what's important here is that we're seeing real effects. Stronger hurricanes, more intense heat waves, changing precipitation patterns. These aren't opinions. These are observations. Trump's response came quick. And we've always had hurricanes, Al. We've always had heat waves. I remember heat waves when I was a kid. Big, beautiful heat waves. Nobody called it climate change back then. They called it summer. There was a ripple of laughter from some of the crew, but Roker wasn't laughing, but the frequency and intensity are increasing, he pressed. I've covered these storms for decades. I've seen the changes myself, and I respect that, Trump said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I respect your experience, but you're a weatherman, Al. A very good weatherman. One of the best. Everybody knows that. But predicting the weather and understanding global climate systems, those are two very different things, wouldn't you say? The slight was subtle enough that it could have been brushed off as a misunderstanding, but everyone in the studio felt it. Roker's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Actually, meteorology and climatology are closely related fields. I think I have a pretty good understanding of both. I'm sure you do, Trump replied. But there was an edge now, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. I'm sure you understand a lot. But you know what I understand? I understand that climate has been changing for millions of years. Millions. Long before humans, long before cars, long before any of this. The Earth goes through cycles. It's natural. Roker leaned forward slightly. Yes, natural climate change occurs, but what we're seeing now is happening at a rate that far exceeds any natural cycle: the Industrial Revolution, the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation. These are factors that are accelerating change beyond what would occur naturally. Trump waved his hand dismissively. Fossil fuels built this country. Al built the whole modern world. Energy independence, economic growth, jobs, all of that comes from energy. And now some people want to shut it all down based on predictions that may or may not be accurate. Models that have been wrong before. By the way, how many times have these climate models been wrong? The conversation was no longer a friendly chat. It had become a debate, and both men seemed to realize they were too far in to back out gracefully. Roker's voice remained steady, but there was steel in it. Now models are refined over time as we gather more data. That's how science works. But the underlying trend is unmistakable. The planet is warming and human activity is the primary driver. Primary driver. Trump echoed. You sound very certain about that. Very certain, but I remember not too long ago people were worried about global cooling. Remember that? In the 70s, everyone was saying we were heading into an ice age. Now it's warming. So which is it, Al? Are we freezing or are we burning up? Those were preliminary studies that were later refined. Roker countered, the scientific consensus now is based on decades of research, thousands of studies, and overwhelming evidence. This isn't a matter of opinion. It's all a matter of opinion until you can demonstrate it beyond any doubt, Trump retorted. And I haven't seen that demonstration. What I've seen is a whole lot of people promoting an agenda. An agenda that would hurt American workers, hurt American businesses, and make us dependent on foreign nations for energy. That's what I see. The piece was supposed to run for 5 minutes. They were approaching 12 now and the producers were furiously scrambling to think of how they could wrap things up without making more of a scene, but Trump and Roker both appeared stubbornly dug in, neither one willing to give in. So you're saying all of the scientists are wrong? Roker demanded, voice raised. All the data, all the research, all the evidence we're seeing before our very eyes, that's all just part of some agenda. I'm saying follow the money, Al, Trump responded. Who's paying for all this research? Who stands to gain from the promotion of climate change? There's a lot of money in this. Billions and billions of dollars. Solar companies, wind companies, electric car companies, they're all making a fortune off it. And who's behind the narrative? The same people who stand to gain from it. You don't find that suspicious? What I find suspicious, Roker persisted, his patience obviously wearing thin, is ignoring reality because it's inconvenient. We have satellites, we have ground stations, we have ocean buoys, we have ice cores, we have tree rings, all telling us the same thing. At what point does the evidence become enough? When it's definitive, Trump said firmly, when it's based on facts, not models and predictions. Hard facts. The facts are before your very eyes, Roker said. His voice now carrying an unmistakable edge of frustration. The Arctic ice is melting at record rates. Sea levels are rising. Coral reefs are dying. These aren't predictions. These are things happening right now today as we speak. Trump leaned forward, matching Roker's intensity. And the Arctic ice has melted before Al. It's melted and refrozen many times throughout history. The Earth goes through warm periods and cold periods. This is basic stuff. The Vikings settled Greenland when it was actually green. Did they have SUVs back then? Did they have coal plants? No, they didn't. But the climate changed anyway. Roker shook his head, a gesture that seemed to say he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're cherry-picking historical examples and ignoring the comprehensive data we have now. The rate of change is what matters. We're seeing temperature increases that would normally take thousands of years taking place in decades. Or maybe Trump countered, your data is flawed. Perhaps your equipment isn't quite as precise as you believe. Perhaps there's something you're not considering. The sun, volcanic eruptions, ocean currents. There are so many variables, and you're telling me you can conclude with certainty that it's all due to man-made emissions. That is arrogant, if you ask me. The adjective arrogant lingered in the air like a gauntlet. Roker's eyebrows narrowed and his words, when he finally spoke, were slow and calculated. What's arrogant is ignoring the work of thousands of scientists because it doesn't suit your agenda. What's arrogant is believing you're smarter than people who've spent their whole lives researching this. And what's naive, Trump snapped back, is swallowing everything you're told without asking questions. I ask questions, Al. That's what leaders do. They don't swallow the conventional wisdom. They dig deeper. They ask hard questions, and when I ask hard questions about climate change, I don't get straight answers. I get besieged. I get called a denier. Well, I'm not denying anything, I'm just unconvinced. Convinced of what? Roker pressed. What would it take to convince you? What proof would be enough? Because it seems like no matter what information we provide, no matter what we see, you've already made up your mind to dismiss it. I've made up my mind, Trump said, his voice rising ever so slightly. To defend American interests, to defend American workers. To ensure we don't wreck our economy, running after some theoretical crisis that may or may not be as bad as everyone says it is. You want to talk about a real crisis? Let's talk about people losing their jobs. Let's talk about energy prices skyrocketing. Let's talk about making America rely on China for solar panels and batteries. That's a real crisis, Al. So it's about economics for you? Roker continued, more as a statement than a question. You're willing to risk the planet for short-term economic benefit. Risk the planet, Trump repeated, almost appalled. You see, this is what I'm talking about. The planet's been around for billions of years. It survived ice ages. It survived warming periods. It survived asteroid collisions. And it's still here. The planet's going to be fine, Al. What we need to worry about is people. Real people with real jobs and real families. And I'm not going to sacrifice their livelihoods for some apocalypse scenario that keeps not occurring. Keeps not occurring. Roker's voice rose a little. We're experiencing record-breaking temperatures almost every year now. We're experiencing catastrophic wildfires, devastating floods, unprecedented droughts. How's that not happening? Weather events, Trump dismissed. Bad weather occurs. It always has. You show me a wildfire today, I'll show you a wildfire 50 years ago. You show me a flood, I'll show you a worse flood 100 years ago. This notion that every bad storm or hot summer constitutes evidence of climate change, that's not scientific. But the pattern and frequency, Roker insisted, his hands sweeping for emphasis. It's not about individual events. It's about the overall trend. And that trend is clear and alarming to you. Perhaps Trump said to you and to people who want to believe it. But to a lot of other people, including some very smart scientists, it's not so clear. And until it is, until there's absolute proof, I'm not going to support policies that harm America. Roker took a breath, it seemed, to try to compose himself. You know, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, politicians, celebrities, experts of all kinds, and I've always tried to remain open-minded to hear different viewpoints. But when someone disregards overwhelming scientific consensus, when they put politics ahead of facts, that's not having a different viewpoint. I said willfully ignorant, Roker explained, not giving ground. There's a difference. You have access to all the information. You choose to ignore it. Trump's jaw tightened. You know what, Al? I came here as a courtesy. I arrived here to enjoy a good conversation, discuss the weather, be cordial, and for you to ambush me with this global warming propaganda, and then you insult me live on TV. Is that what today is about? Is that what NBC stands for today? That is not an ambush, Roker complained. You raised your opinions on global warming, and I reacted with facts. If you're insulted by facts, that's your problem. Facts, Trump replied, sarcasm dripping from his voice. Your facts. The facts that you hold to be true, but there are other facts too. Al, and you here in your comfortable studio with your comfortable position telling me I'm ignorant because I disagree with you. That's rich. My cushy job is monitoring hurricanes, reporting on natural disasters, and observing communities being leveled. I've stood in the rubble of Katrina, Sandy, Harvey, Maria. I've witnessed what these storms do to human beings, and they're intensifying. So don't lecture me on comfort. And I've rebuilt communities, Trump replied. I've generated jobs. I've constructed buildings. I've spurred economies. I know how to make it happen in the real world, not only in some academic theory or computer simulation. The real world, all that's where I'm at. The real world is evolving, Roker stated resolutely. And if we don't do anything, it's going to change in such ways that all your buildings and all your work are going to be irrelevant because you can't conduct business on a planet that's becoming uninhabitable. Uninhabitable, Trump chuckled. But there was no joke in it. Now you're saying the planet is going to become uninhabitable. This is the kind of hyperbole I'm referring to. The fear-mongering, the apocalyptic predictions. I've been hearing that all my life. In the 70s, it was the impending ice age. In the 80s, it was acid rain. In the 90s, it was the ozone layer. In the 2000s, it was global warming. Now we have climate change. It's always something. And yet, somehow, we're always just on the cusp of disaster, but it never actually arrives. Those were all actual issues that we solved, Roker said, his patience presumably wearing thin. We solved the ozone layer by phasing out some chemicals. We curbed acid rain through environmental policy. Those issues improved because we acted. That's the whole idea. Or perhaps Trump had proposed they were not as bad as everyone said in the first place. Perhaps the projections were inaccurate. Perhaps the models were faulty. And maybe, just possibly, the same has been happening with climate change. Exaggerated projections based on limited information driven by individuals with an agenda. The agenda is saving the planet, Roker continued, his voice again increasing. The agenda is ensuring our grandchildren and children have a habitable world. What's your agenda, Mr. President? What's your rationale for doing nothing? My rationale? Trump's voice equaled Roker's volume now. I don't need an excuse for not buying into hysteria. I don't need an excuse for keeping American workers first. I don't need an excuse for calling out narratives that do not add up. And I certainly don't need to defend myself to you, Al, on your little weather segment. Little weather segment, Roker repeated. And there was pain blended with anger in his tone now. I've been doing this for more than 40 years. I've gained the respect of the public and my colleagues. And this little weather portion reaches millions of folks every day. And that's wonderful, Trump said, although his tone indicated otherwise. That's just great for you, Al. You've had a great career, but just because you've had a long career doesn't mean you're correct about everything and that you can lecture me on national TV and call me ignorant. I referred to your stance willfully ignorant, Roker explained once more. And I mean it. When you have access to all of the scientific evidence and you decide to reject it for political reasons, what else would you call it? Trump stood up suddenly, a sudden motion catching everyone off guard. You know what I call it? I call it having the courage to think for myself. Something you clearly don't understand. You just parrot whatever the approved narrative is. Whatever your handlers tell you to say, and you think that makes you informed. It doesn't. It makes you a puppet. The insult stung and Roker stood up too, standing across the weather center from Trump. A puppet, I've reported from war zones, from natural disasters, from some of the most treacherous locations on Earth. Then maybe you should behave like a journalist instead of an activist. Trump retorted, his finger pointing at Roker. Perhaps you should report the news rather than attempt to make it. Because that's what this is, Al. You invited me here to make a scene, to attempt to embarrass me, to get your viral moment. Well, congratulations. You achieved it. I invited you here to have a conversation, Roker said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion now. A conversation about something that matters, something that impacts every person on this planet. And instead of responding honestly, you've made it a political circus like you always do, like I always do. Trump's eyes grew wide. You're the one who started to attack me. You're the one who called me ignorant. You're the one who couldn't simply have a nice conversation about the weather without turning it into an interrogation. This is your show, Al. This is your network. This is your circus. Because some things are too important to simply smile about, Roker insisted. When you get up and talk about climate change and you're spreading misinformation, when you get up and get millions of people to disbelieve a crisis, that's not something I can just smile and agree with. That's not something I can be courteous about. Misinformation, Trump remarked, shaking his head. There's that word again. Anyone who disagrees with the official narrative is spreading misinformation. Anyone who asks questions is a conspiracy theorist. Anyone who thinks differently is dangerous. That's the world you want to live in, Al, where everyone has to think the same way, believe the same things, or else they're the enemy. That's not what I'm saying at all, Roker protested. I'm saying that when the evidence is overwhelming, when the science is settled, when the experts agree, we should listen. That's not conformity. That's wisdom. The science is never settled. Trump countered. Real scientists know that. Real scientists question. They test. They challenge assumptions. They don't just fall in line because everyone else is. And the fact that you think the science is settled on something as complex as global climate tells me you don't really understand science at all. Roker's face flushed. Don't lecture me about understanding science. I've worked with climatologists, meteorologists, oceanographers, atmospheric scientists. I've read the studies. I've looked at the data. Have you? Or do you just listen to whatever your political advisors tell you will play well with your base? My base, Trump said with a bitter laugh, cares about having jobs. They care about feeding their families. They care about keeping the lights on and the heat running. They don't care about theoretical temperature increases 50 years from now. They care about real problems today now. And you standing here acting like they're stupid for caring about their actual lives instead of your climate models. That's elitism. Al, that's exactly why people don't trust the media anymore. This isn't about elitism, Roker said, his voice strained. This is about reality, and the reality is that climate change is going to affect those same people you claim to care about. It's going to affect their jobs, their homes, their children's futures. You can't just ignore it because it's inconvenient. I'm not ignoring anything, Trump said firmly. I'm prioritizing. I'm making sure that whatever we do about the climate doesn't destroy people's lives in the process. I'm making sure we don't hand over our economy to China while we chase after wind and solar power that can't even keep the lights on during a cold winter. I'm being responsible, Al. Something you wouldn't understand because you don't have to make the tough decisions. Tough decisions. Roker's voice cracked slightly. The tough decision is admitting when you're wrong. The tough decision is changing course when the evidence tells you to. The tough decision is putting the future ahead of short-term political gain. But you won't do that, will you? Because that would mean admitting you don't have all the answers. I never said I have all the answers, Trump replied. But his voice had taken on a different quality now, colder and more controlled. But I know enough to recognize when I'm being sold something. And that's what climate change is, Al. It's a product. It's being sold to you, to the public, to everyone, by people who benefit from you buying it. And I'm not buying. It's not a product. It's science, Roker said, almost pleading. Now, why can't you see that? Why can't you just look at the evidence with an open mind? Because I've seen too many so-called experts be wrong, Trump said. I've seen too many predictions fail to come true. I've seen too many people use fear to manipulate others, and I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to let America fall for it. So, you can sit here and judge me all you want, Al. You can call me ignorant. You can call me whatever you want, but I'm done with this conversation. Trump turned to leave, but Roker's voice stopped him. You're just going to walk away just like that. When the conversation gets difficult, when someone challenges you with facts, you just leave. Trump turned back, his face a mask of controlled anger. No, Al, I'm leaving because this stopped being a conversation a long time ago. This became a trap, an ambush, and I don't play those games. You want to have a real discussion about climate policy, about energy, about what's actually best for America, I'm happy to do that, but not like this. Not with someone who's already decided I'm the villain before I even walk through the door. I didn't decide anything, Roker said, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. I responded to what you said. I challenged your statements with facts. If that feels like an ambush to you, maybe you should examine why facts feel threatening. Trump stared at him for a long moment, and for just a second, it seemed like he might sit back down, might continue the conversation, but then he shook his head slowly. You really believe that, don't you? You really think you're on the side of the angels here? That you're fighting the good fight? That anyone who disagrees with you is evil or stupid or both? That's sad, Al. That's really sad because you used to be better than this. And you used to be a businessman, Roker replied, not willing to let Trump have the last word. Someone who dealt with reality, with numbers, with actual facts. Now you're just a politician, saying whatever keeps your supporters happy. Truth be damned. Truth? Trump said, almost laughing again. You want to talk about truth? The truth is that you've been predicting disaster for years and it keeps not happening. The truth is that people are tired of being told they're terrible for wanting a good life. The truth is that your climate crusade has become a religion and anyone who doesn't worship at your altar is a heretic. That's the truth, Al. The truth, Roker said, his hand spreading wide in a gesture of frustration, is that we're running out of time. The truth is that every year we delay makes the problem worse. The truth is that future generations are going to look back at people like you and ask why you didn't act when you had the chance. That's the truth. Future generations, Trump said, will thank people like me for not destroying the economy over a maybe. For not sacrificing their present for someone else's vision of the future, for standing up to the mob and thinking for myself. History will be the judge, Al, not you. You're right, Roker said quietly. And there was something almost resigned in his voice now. History will be the judge, and I think we both know what that judgment will be. Trump studied Roker's face for a moment and something flickered across his own expression. Something that might have been disappointment or perhaps recognition of a bridge burned beyond repair. You know what the saddest part of this whole thing is? We could have had a good conversation. We could have found some common ground. But you couldn't help yourself. You had to go there. You had to make it personal. You had to be right more than you wanted to be effective. I am right, Roker said simply. And sometimes being right is more important than being polite about it. Then enjoy being right, Trump said, his tone final. Now enjoy it all by yourself. Because this is the last time I'm doing anything with you or this network. You made your choice, Al. Now you get to live with it. As Trump moved to leave again, Roker called out one more time. That's what you do, isn't it? When anyone stands up to you, when anyone refuses to go along with your version of reality, you cut them off. You walk away. You declare victory and leave. That's not strength, Mr. President. That's cowardice. The word stopped Trump in his tracks. He turned slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. Cowardice is hiding behind consensus. Cowardice is being too afraid to think for yourself. Cowardice is attacking someone when you know they can't really fight back because you're on your home turf with your friendly audience. You want to call me a coward, Al? Look in the mirror first. I look in the mirror every day, Roker said, meeting Trump's gaze without flinching, and I can live with what I see because I know I'm fighting for something that matters. Can you say the same? What do you think? Did Roker go too far by calling Trump's position willfully ignorant? Or was he right to challenge those views so directly? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you subscribe because moments like this don't come around often and you don't want to miss the next one.